Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Abazadeh.
And you have yet another success story
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Egg Whisperer Show. I am so excited to have our special guest tonight. Hi Dr. Nikki.
Hi.
This is Dr. Nikki Goldstein, a world-renowned sexologist, and she's here with us from Sydney, Australia. Dr. Nikki, tell us all about yourself.
Well, I'm a sexologist and relationship expert, and what I specialize in is in education. So I'm the one that's out in the media and releasing a lot of content and talking about the subjects that I think we need to discuss more, but we're not yet having those conversations.
Awesome. And tonight's topic is how to increase not just emotional, but also physical intimacy. And I just want to ask you a whole bunch of questions that my patients ask me all the time, but I have a personal one. Dr. Nikki, do you shave your legs, and do you think that's important for sex?
I waxed my legs, and confession, a few months ago, because it is winter here, we're now spring, my boyfriend said to me, you know, your leg hairs are the longest that you've ever been. And he's saying, you've got to get a wax. And I got offended because I wanted to send him my waxing bill.
Right.
And then I realized it's actually something that I do because I like to have nice, smooth legs. So it was kind of a bit of a reminder to me that we need to be doing those things that make us feel sexy.
Right.
And we shouldn't be changing ourselves for someone else. But I do think in a relationship, you do need to listen to what your partner is attracted to.
Right, that's so true. But when you're going through fertility treatment, it's so hard because your self-esteem might be down, you're feeling bloated, you're feeling moody. How do you get yourself back feeling sexy when you're going through all that?
Well, I definitely think it's a journey, and I feel like women need to give themselves a little bit of a break.
Right.
We seem to all be in this fight for perfection, and if you're feeling bloated and cranky and just feeling yuck about yourself, give yourself some space to be okay with that.
Right.
And then I always think, do one thing that makes you feel better. It might not be able to change your physical appearance, but it could be something like getting your nails done or getting a blow away. But we all have that break in case of an emergency thing that we do when we want to feel better about ourselves. I personally love going and getting a lovely blowout because I'm terrible at doing hair. So if I have nice hair and I'm feeling bloated, it kind of balances itself out.
Right. And then when you're feeling bloated, that makes you feel moody. And then for my patients who are on fertility drugs, all of a sudden now you have to have sex because you're ovulating, and that can create sometimes some disagreements between a mommy-daddy couple. So what kind of things can you do around ovulation when, you know, time's of the essence, you know you're ovulating, and yet you might not necessarily be in the mood? So what can you do when you're facing that type of situation?
Well, I think this is where you really need to make sure that sex is still fun. Obviously, yes, that there is more of a medical intent at that point in time to be having sex, but you need to enjoy it so it doesn't become a chore. Because I do speak to so many couples where, you know, they're in this fight to get pregnant, and sex no longer is a way that they bond and connect, and it's just this means to an end.
Right.
So talk about together the things that are pleasurable, and you might not have a lot of time, but have a discussion around how you can make that time fun and cheeky and kinky. You know, a lot of people love a little sneaky quickie, and maybe if you've got to be having that quickie because you're ovulating and you're both together at that point, you know, talk it up and make it feel like it's a little bit spicy. You know, you need to have that communication around sex, which, funnily enough, so many people, even though that they're married, even though they're in a relationship, do not talk about sex with each other. And especially when you're going through fertility treatments, you need to be discussing those. And as a woman, you need to be able to say, I'm struggling to feel sexy. Can you help me feel sexy? Because the sexier I feel, the more I'm going to be in this. And maybe as a guy, he's also got to say, you know, I'm struggling a little bit at the moment because sex feels like a chore. Can we talk about what we might be able to do? The problem is we're so scared about offending each other, especially when we look at, you know, throwing in something like a medical treatment at that point in time. It's like, as a guy, do you talk to your partner who's the one that's medically having to suffer, and is she going to turn around and think, well, you're such a dick because you're only thinking about your own sexual needs? But this is where we just kind of need to relax with it and just go, okay, how can we both find this enjoyable as much as we can during a time where we're actually having sex for a particular focus.
Right. And the thing is, there's so many mixed messages, because when you're in treatment, you're told, have sex, don't have sex now, abstain. And it's like, almost you feel like it's dangerous to have sex or be intimate because, you know, you're told that you shouldn't. And so sometimes I find when I ask couples and I say, well, when's the last time you had sex? I'm surprised when they say, sex, it's been like months. So what can a couple do who it's actually been maybe 3 to 6 months where they've been intimate? Like, how do you get back into that sort of groove or rhythm of things again?
Well, yeah, the difficulty with this is because everyone at some point in their relationship will go through a period where sex stops. And then it becomes this talking about things. And as much as I've just said, talking about things is really important, you've also got to get back there and start doing things. You know, I said to a friend of mine recently, she's not having sex with her husband. I said, start. Because then when you're there, and think about what happens when we have sex. We feel close and bonded with our partner. We can look at the hormonal thing that happens and we're releasing oxytocin, but it's also a very intimate time when you're face to face naked with somebody. You do feel close with them, so you need to have a look at that first starting to get back in the sack as for that intent. Get back to being close and intimate with your partner. That will then allow you to have those conversations around your sex life. What's been going on? Why have we stopped doing it? But I think people get stuck in this trap about, what do I do about it? What pill do I take? What toy do I use? Let's just start with getting back to the basics. And it might not even have to be penetration sex. Like I always think being physically intimate is not necessarily about penis and vagina. It is about touching and caressing and feeling good with each other and feeling connected with each other. Get back into that mode and then start working out, why is it that it stopped in the first place?
And I think that sometimes it seems like orgasm there's a lot of pressure around that as well. And believe it or not, I have a lot of male patients who ask me, do I have to give my wife an orgasm every time we have sex in order to have a baby? And my comment would be, she'd probably like you better. But what would you say in that kind of, if someone asked you that question?
Well, it's one of those interesting ones, because when a guy says, do I have to be giving my wife an orgasm, I'm thinking, yeah, you should at least be trying. But we also need to be not so focused on an orgasm, because I think that you can still enjoy sex, but especially as a woman, when you feel like you have to have an orgasm every time, you get stuck in your head, you might be putting pressure on your partner. I remember hearing, and it's probably an old wives' tale, that if a woman had an orgasm, the involuntary contractions would help the sperm to travel up. Someone then threw that out the window. But let's not look at orgasms necessarily, and let's look at maybe pleasurable sex. And I think that if you're having pleasurable sex with your partner when you're trying to get pregnant, first of all, it's going to be a much more enjoyable experience, but you might be having more sex. And that's something that, when people are trying to get pregnant and sex becomes a chore, they're not having sex enough, well, ergo, there's a massive problem. So don't put pressure on yourself that it has to be an orgasm every time, but look at what is pleasurable. It might be a sensation. It might be feeling close to someone. As a guy, you've at least got to put in the effort for that, for pleasurable sex, not sex as a chore. If orgasm can occur, great, that's a bonus for her. But I think that the focus needs to be pleasurable, so you're having more of it.
And you talked a little bit about toys, but what about like porn? Do you think that can help a relationship, or is it bad for relationships? What does the doctor say?
Well, I think porn's a really interesting one, because we blame it for so many of our sexual problems in the bedroom. Yet it can actually be something that can help us. It's up to the individual couple to work out where that line is. So if you're watching porn all the time, or you've got a partner that can only get turned on by watching porn, I would say that there's a bit of a problem there, and there's a codependency and attachment issues to those people on the screen.
And then how do you deal with that? If he does, how do you deal with that? Because when a guy's going to the collection room, he has to, a lot of guys watch porn, and how do you deal with it if there's a sort of codependence, whether it's on the male side or female side?
Well, I think if you look at the codependence, often we find that people that are really attached to porn, that there's an attachment issue within their own relationship. Especially guys that maybe are not receiving that attachment with their partner. There's been a period of not having sex, or the sex a bit disconnected. That's where someone might become more attracted to overuse of porn. But I think that porn can be really healthy because it taps into this part of our brain about fantasy. You know, fantasy is free space where we can think about anything that we want to, and it doesn't have to be legal or consensual or anything, and it doesn't have to mean anything. It's just that instant thought that goes, oh, that sounds exciting. So porn allows us to live out that fantasy a little bit. We get to watch somebody else living out something that maybe we wouldn't necessarily try in person, but we find it a turn on to watch it. And it can also be really good sometimes, or some particular types of porn, to give you ideas in the bedroom. And this is where you've got to be careful as well, is that we see this emergence of porn becoming kinkier and kinkier and kinkier, which is where it's very disturbing when people are trying to emulate what goes on the screen. But then we also have other companies that are out there trying to produce porn that's very healthy and empowering for women and for couples, and they're trying to show real sex, and they're trying to show women of all different types of you know, variations in body size and color and things like that. So that's where you've kind of got to have your porn filter on in your brain and have a look at how much you're actually watching. Have a look at the type of porn that you're actually watching as well. But keep in mind that just because someone might be attracted to a particular type of porn doesn't mean that they necessarily want to do that in everyday life. You know, perfect example is so many women like to every so often watch lesbian porn. Does it mean that we're all lesbians? No. Have we all fantasized about being with another woman? Probably. So that's something to keep in mind, because I find partners can get a bit sensitive about that. Oh, if my partner's asking me to watch gangbang porn, does that mean that's what he wants to do to me? No, not necessarily.
Probably not,
Probably not.
I mean, we talk about how porn can affect, as a society, might be a negative thing, but I also think that cell phones, for sure, are interrupting a lot of people's sex life, because people are so addicted, so changed to their cell phone that they have a hard time connecting with their partner. So I think that the birth rate decline that we're seeing, I mean, you see me talking about egg freezing, we've talked to both about egg freezing, but I think also cell phone use can also affect a couple's relationship. How should people deal with that?
Put the cell phone down. And it's these interesting things that we are being so connected and we are being so reliant, but then we've got all this technology that's being developed to help us connect, which is the irony, is that the technology is the thing that's responsible for kind of splitting us apart, but then we have apps and things like that that are helping us to reconnect with each other. Well, wouldn't the common sense thing be to maybe decrease in technology when you're at home with your partner and so forth? So I think first of all, it's about being mindful of how much you're using your cell phone when you're with your partner. I saw the other day, sitting at the coffee shop, there was a couple that were having breakfast and they were both on their phones. And I wanted to go up and say, put your phones down and have a conversation. You might not think that you have something on your mind to talk about, but when the phone is down and away, you will start having a conversation and you will start to connect with your partner a little bit more. So, you know, yes, we have to have Instagram and Facebook and we're on emails and so forth. But I think when you're with a group of people, put it away, put it in your bag, switch it on to silent. People can wait half an hour to an hour, and be really mindful about how much screen time that you're having when you're with your partner.
Right, so true. Dr. Nikki, I love having you on the show tonight. It is so fun. Where can people find more of you?
So the best bet would probably be Facebook, Dr. Nikki Goldstein, and Instagram, Dr. Nikki G, and obviously the podcast, which we're in the process of doing more and more episodes, and hopefully we'll make our way over to the US early next year.
Nice. I just want to take a look at all the questions that I want to ask you tonight. I want to make sure that I don't miss a single thing. I think that one of my other questions, really important, that I wanted to see what you thought about was, what do you think about date nights, scheduling sex? Do you think that actually works, or does that make things more stressful for people?
I think that it can be really useful when you have two people that are flat out busy. If you don't have the time to be having sex as much as you would like to be having, then scheduling sexy time, not sex, no time for sex, but time where it's just the two of you, where the phones are off, the TV's off, maybe the kids are in bed or they're with the in-laws, time where you can just be together as a couple. If that leads into sex, great. But the risk of scheduling sex as such is that it can feel like a lot of pressure. However, if we're talking about getting pregnant, then you may need to, at that point in time, schedule sex nights and keep it like a meeting, you know, and sometimes you do need to force yourself into it. There's this battle for women around, or women and men, when one wants it and one doesn't, who compromise. I do think that sex is very important for relationships, and sometimes we need to push ourselves into the moment, because once we get there, then we enjoy it. But it's that moment of, I'm tired, I've got to get up in the morning, I've got my hair done, okay, no, I know it's a priority to feel intimate and close with my partner, so I'm going to start this, and once I start it, I'm going to start to feel the benefits.
And what kind of frequency of these dates should people be having? Like, what's a healthy number? Is it once a week? Is it once a month? What do you recommend?
It depends on the couple, and I think it also depends on how many factors you have pulling you apart. If you don't have children, then you've got a lot of time to be together as a couple. If you do have kids and you're both working, then you're going to be pulled in so many different directions. So it might be more important to be scheduling these times more regularly. So this is where we need to look as couples, as individuals, and look at what works for us, and stop comparing ourselves to everyone else out there. And that's a really good rule in general, is stop comparing yourself to what everyone else is doing, because that's not you. This is you. And let's have those conversations to work around as a couple and as these two individual people that are teaming up together, what works for you.
And I would say sometimes I have couples that they just can't have sex. I mean, the intimacy issues are so serious. Are those the types of couples that could really benefit from sex therapy and seeing a sex therapist?
I'm a massive fan of therapy, and I think that we don't do therapy enough, because what normally happens is people try, and they see that point where they have to go to therapy is, well, it's nearly all but over, or, you know, we've failed at something. And then when they get there, there's been so much done that the therapy ends up to be a way to help people exit the relationship. Now, you've got to keep in mind, we were never taught how to be in a relationship. The only thing that we have is role modeling from our parents. We need to consider that our parents were born in a different generation at a different time, and they didn't have the same stresses that we have these days. So I think it's really useful that if you feel like you're struggling a little bit, as a couple, go and talk to someone and get those different coping tools and strategies, because then you're able to implement those, so you don't get to a point where, you know, it's really a point red. So you've got to take the shame off it and not feel like you failed as a couple, and feel like it's something that you're doing that's preventative.
So true. And what can people expect when they see, let's say, a sex therapist, if they're having these types of issues? Like, what kinds of things would happen in the appointment?
A lot of homework. And by that, I don't just mean, you know, having sex, but, you know, a sex therapist is able to help you with tools. And these are not just to do with the bedroom. This is outside of the bedroom first, because when we look at physical intimacy starts with emotional intimacy. And a lot of women will say, you have to have sex with me here first. So a lot of those things that may need to be addressed, like communication,
taking out the garbage, cleaning the...
Are there any issues? Like, am I, as a woman, am I so close to you sexually because I feel like you're such a douche because you're not helping me around the house, and I'm actually internally holding on to a lot of anger. When you're angry at someone and frustrated with them, it's really hard to be turned on by them. Men are a little bit different. They can kind of get turned on whenever, whereas women, we are more emotional. So often there's some form of issue or something that is getting couples stuck. And first of all, it's important to find out, what is that and where is that? And are you communicating enough to be able to discover those things along the way?
Are there any good books or resources for couples? Everyone's so busy. Some people say, I don't have time for another doctor's appointment. I can't see a sex therapist. So I know I'm referring patients to Sex and Life, your podcast, but do you have any books or resources that patients can go to who are interested in learning more about different homework assignments that they might benefit from?
It depends really on your niche, right, of what you're zoning in on. So, you know, there's a book for everything, and there's some great authors out there. So maybe you want to explore something in the bedroom, then you're looking at more of a sex book. Or you might be looking at someone like Marty Klein, who's written books about sexual intelligence, or Mating in Captivity, Esther Perel. You know, there's different focuses on what you're specifically looking for. So, you know, I'm more than happy if people want to email me and say, hey, this is the kind of thing I'm looking for. Who do you recommend? Because we are quite a small knit group, so we all do know each other, and I'm familiar with work. But as a general couples book, there's nothing that kind of jumps out of my mind, but specific factors that people are looking at, whether it's, you know, in the bedroom, out of the bedroom, dealing with emotional jealousy and things like that, there is an abundance.
Right.
I think these days it's really good to get onto ebooks, because I tell people, here's a lot of books that they should be looking up, and then they never touch them because we are so busy, but everyone's at the gym and everyone's going to the commute. So they're able to tune in on their phones. There's a lot of online shows as well that, you're able to podcasting, but not just mine. There's a lot of other sex therapists out there as well. So I think it's really about zoning into the specific aim that you're looking for and what you're trying to gain out of it. And then there's just this abundance of content these days to do with sex that's not necessarily traditional media, that's more online, that you're able to tap into.
And you also wrote a book recently. Tell me about your book.
So my book's called Single But Dating. So it's not for the couples, but it's for the single girls. So I really found that there was this lack of information and permission for women to be dating and not in a relationship, and not trying to trap a husband. And it was like the modern element of what we're missing in dating these days. So I had a lot of fun writing about it, because it was also my own personal life and my professional life. And I've got my own stories in there about what it was like when I was dating, and I've frozen my eggs, and I've spoken about it as well. So I really tried to touch on the subjects that I felt that were needed for the modern woman, but weren't really being spoken about. And so far I've had a lot of messages from women saying, thank you, I feel normal. Because it's not about putting this pressure on a woman to find a man and have the baby and have this fantasy that we're all taught that should be the ideal. It's really working out what is the right path for you.
Right. What are 3 tips? I know you have to run because you're going to be going on another show very, very soon. But what are 3 tips that you would give my patients, fertility patients that are struggling, to improve their emotional and physical intimacy? Like the most important 3 things that you would want fertility patients to know.
Well, I think this starts with the individual. For a woman, make sure you do things that make yourself feel good. Now, keeping in mind, I know that you're bloated and I know that you feel disgusting about yourself, but it's really about trying to shift your mind. It might be a shopping spree. It might be going buying something, anything that's going to help you through that process to make you feel good about yourself. It's really important to do it. I also think you need to have enjoyment in the relationship outside of the bedroom. I feel like this is a time that there is so much stress that you tend to only be talking about fertility issues and only be talking about when we're doing what next and what's going on. Make sure that you still celebrate your relationship as a couple and do some nice things together. It might be, beautiful dinner at home. It might be a nice walk or a date somewhere that takes your mind off what you're currently going through. And the last is one I think that's really important that we've spoken about, is to still make sure that sex is fun. And by doing that, you're going to have to communicate. Talk around what turns you on, what you're struggling with. Sometimes it's harder to talk about what we're not happy about in the bedroom as opposed to talking about what we want. You might have to have those awkward conversations to be able to get to that point where you can work out together how to formulate a sex life through this process that still has its purpose to get you pregnant, but also still enjoyable and bonding for you as a couple.
So what I'm hearing from you is that communication is really number 1, right? I mean, that's the key to
help communicating. That can be our 4th point. That's the hard thing, is that we say communication all the time. Constantly we're telling people communicate, communicate, communicate. What I have found is a lot of people, depending on the type of role modeling that they've had, their type of personalities, they struggle to effectively communicate. If you think your partner and you are locked heads a little bit and you're saying one thing and he's saying another and you're not quite getting there, that's a perfect point to put up your hand and say, you know what, let's go talk to a relationship therapist, a sex therapist, a marriage counselor, and start to get those tools around communication. Because one of the difficult things for us when we're in a heterosexual relationship is that we're sometimes so different. It's so hard to understand each other. When you're looking at men and women, it's like we speak a completely different language. So when I'm telling you to communicate and discuss all these things around sex, it might sound logical, but it's actually a really difficult thing to do. So sometimes we need to learn these tools around how to communicate with the opposite sex, how to communicate effectively, what we do when we hit these, points where we're a bit angry and frustrated. These are all the things that I wish that they would teach us at school.
So true. Dr. Nikki, thank you for coming on. I really hope you'll come on again and just teach us more about how to effectively communicate, how to improve our sex lives, and all the greatest research like you always have and continue to do. So best of luck in everything you're doing today. And thank you again for being on. And we'll look for you on your podcast, Sex and Life. And we can't wait to chat with you on Facebook more in the months and years to come. Thanks, Dr. Nikki.
Hopefully I'll be over your way soon.
Yes, looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.